Rain slapped the cracked pavement behind a rundown diner on the edge of a forgotten town. Ellie crouched low behind a row of rusted trash bins, her thin frame wrapped in a coat too small and too wet to offer warmth. Fever burned under her skin, and every breath rattled in her chest like broken glass. She hugged her knees tightly, trying to vanish into the shadows, away from the eyes that had only ever seen her as a burden. The bruises on her arms and ribs throbbed with the memory of angry hands and cruel words. "You're too sick to earn your keep," her former employer had screamed, before tossing her into the rain like garbage. But it wasn't just the beating that hurt. It was the truth behind it. She was sick, too sick to scrub dishes or carry plates, and in a world where worth was measured in labor, that made her invisible. Inside the diner, warm lights cast a glow over formica tables and chipped mugs. One man sat alone, his weathered cowboy hat pulled low, a quiet silhouette in the corner booth. Clay had spent most of his life riding under open skies, but lately he only rode toward silence. He watched the rain streak the windows without really seeing it, until movement outside caught his eye. A girl, no older than 20, crumpled like a rag doll beside the dumpster. Without thinking, he stood, tossed some cash on the table, and walked out into the storm. Ellie didn't even flinch when he knelt beside her. She expected cruelty, but instead a gentle voice broke through the downpour. "You all right, miss?" he asked, wrapping a flannel jacket around her. She opened her mouth, but only a rasp came out. He didn't press, just lifted her like she weighed nothing, like her pain was worth carrying. He didn't take her to a hospital or a shelter. He took her home, to a quiet ranch miles away, where the only sound was wind through the grass and the creak of the barn door. That night, she slept warm for the first time in weeks. She didn't know who he was or why he helped. All she knew was, for the first time in a long time, someone saw her as more than broken. And that was enough to spark the smallest hope. Inside the worn diner, the air smelled of burnt coffee and fried regret. Clay sat alone in a corner booth, shoulders hunched beneath a faded denim jacket, his wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow over his weathered face. He didn't come for conversation, hadn't for years. He came for the silence, the routine, the small comfort of lukewarm coffee in chipped mugs. He stirred it slowly, not really tasting it, his mind elsewhere. On roads he'd ridden, on a past he didn't talk about, and a home that hadn't felt like one since the day cancer took his wife. He stared out the rain-streaked window, eyes dulled by habit. But then something flickered in the corner of his vision, something that cut through the numb. A figure in the alley behind the diner, collapsing like a marionette with its strings snipped. For a second he wasn't sure it was real. No one else in the diner seemed to notice or care, just another shadow in a town full of them. But Clay moved. He didn't wait for questions or someone else to step in. He tossed a few bills on the table, grabbed his hat, and pushed through the squeaky door into the storm. She was crumpled near the trash bins, soaked to the bone, her face pale and bruised, her body too still. Clay knelt beside her and gently touched her shoulder. Her skin was ice. She flinched weakly, expecting pain, but he only said, "Easy now." He saw the fear in her eyes before they rolled back. The kind of fear that doesn't come from one bad day, it comes from too many. Without a word, he slipped his arms under her, careful not to hurt her further. She was light, too light, and as he lifted her, she didn't resist. She didn't have the strength to. Clay didn't know who she was or what she'd been through, but he knew what it was like to lose everything. And in that moment, all he knew was that she didn't belong in the cold. Not tonight. Not ever again. Ellie woke to the soft crackle of firewood and the smell of something warm. Real warmth, not from steam vents or trash fires, but from a hearth someone had built to comfort, not just survive. Her eyes fluttered open to dim light, filtering through the wooden slats of a barn. A wool blanket cocooned her, tucked around her with a kind of care she hadn't felt in years. Panic rushed in before thought did. She bolted upright, heart hammering, eyes wild. A shape moved near the far wall. Him, the man from the diner, the cowboy. He raised his hand slowly, kept his distance. "Ain't gonna hurt you," he said, softly, voice like gravel smoothed by time. "You passed out. Figured you could use a place to rest." She didn't answer, didn't have words. Her body still screamed in places, but something in the air, quiet, steady, clean, made her stay. The first day he brought broth in a chipped blue bowl and left it on a wooden crate by her hay-stuffed bed. He didn't watch her eat. He didn't ask her name. He just came and went like a ghost with a kind face. The second day he added bread. The third, bandages. She let him clean the wounds. It hurt, but he was gentle. Said little. Always said little. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked, her voice no louder than the whisper of wind through the barn slats. He sat on an overturned bucket and stared at the fire. "Lost someone," he said after a long pause. "A long time ago. She was sick. Folks gave up on her. I didn't." Ellie watched him, unsure whether she felt seen or exposed. Maybe both. "Did she make it?" she asked, not sure why. He didn't answer, just looked into the flames like they held something he couldn't touch anymore. Maybe he saw her ghost, in Ellie's eyes. Or maybe, for the first time in her life, someone saw Ellie. Not the illness, not the scars, not the weakness, but her. Just her. And maybe that was enough for now to begin healing. The late afternoon sun spilled golden light across the porch where Ellie and Clay stood side by side, rinsing worn clothes in a rusted tin basin. The barn cats lounged nearby, tails twitching in the quiet peace that had slowly grown between them. Ellie was stronger now, still thin, still tired, but she laughed sometimes, and that alone felt like a small miracle. As she shook out an old coat she hadn't touched in weeks, something slipped from the inner pocket and fluttered to the ground. Clay bent down to pick it up, a crumpled envelope, water-stained but sealed. He glanced at her. "Yours?" Ellie froze. Her fingers gripped the coat like it might disappear. "Yeah," she whispered, her voice suddenly far away. "I never opened it." Curious but careful, Clay handed it back to her. She stared at it for a long time, her breath uneven. Then, with trembling fingers, she tore it open. Her eyes moved. Over the words, slow at first, then faster. A choked sound escaped her throat. "What is it?" Clay asked gently. She held it out like it weighed 100 pounds. "It's from the free clinic. I have an autoimmune disorder. My body's been attacking itself for years. Fatigue, pain, fevers, all of it. I told them I wasn't lazy." Her voice cracked and tears ran down her cheeks. "They said I was making excuses, that I didn't want to work, that I was weak. All this time, it wasn't in my head." Clay took the letter and read it quietly. The diagnosis was clear, clinical. But the truth behind it hit like a freight train. All those beatings, all those cold stares, the nights she went hungry, the days she dragged herself through pain that no one cared to name. They should have seen you, he said softly. Should have listened. She dropped onto the porch steps, covering her face with her hands. But for once, the tears weren't just from pain. They were from release. From the weight finally lifting. Clay sat beside her and didn't say much. He didn't need to. He just stayed. And in the silence, Ellie realized that someone finally understood. So did she, and that changed everything. The wind rolled gently across the open fields, carrying the scent of wildflowers and warm soil. Evening light bathed the ranch in a soft orange glow as Ellie rocked slowly on a wooden porch swing, hand-carved and smoothed by Clay's quiet hands. He'd built it for her when she started walking more, started smiling more. She ran her fingers along the grain, each groove a reminder that someone once looked at her and saw worth. She was still healing. Her body ached on cold mornings, and some days were heavier than others. But she wasn't hiding anymore. Her eyes were clearer, her shoulders less burdened. For the first time in her life, the silence around her didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. Clay stepped out of the house carrying 2 chipped mugs. The steam curled between them like a secret. He handed one to her and sat down with a quiet sigh. "You ever think," he said after a long pause, "that maybe you weren't too sick to work? Maybe you were just waiting for the right kind of work?" She looked over at him, eyebrows raised. He gave a half smile. "The kind where someone sees you, cares for you, the kind where you don't have to prove you deserve to breathe." Ellie chuckled softly, a sound that once seemed impossible. She took a sip of tea, let the warmth sink in, then leaned her head back and looked at the wide open sky. "Maybe," she said, her voice gentle but steady. "I was just waiting to be seen." Clay didn't answer, but the way he looked at her, steady, proud, kind, said enough. The swing creaked softly as they rocked in time with the breeze. In that quiet moment, surrounded by golden fields and healing hearts, Ellie knew she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming someone new. Not the broken girl in the alley, not the sick one who everyone gave up on. She was home. She was wanted. And she was seen. And sometimes that's all it takes to start again.